Oh, I'm in. Okay. Shoot. Everybody here, I just want to make sure they're set.
Yep.
Okay. All right, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Are you guys good to get started? Yes. Okay, great. Okay, awesome. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Student Learning and Achievement Committee for October. It's 6:30, and so my name is Jennifer Chrysler. I am the chair of the committee, and I am officially calling the committee meeting to order. Here present from the board is Matt Campbell, Burl Pickle-Antonio, Daphne Maureen, and Brian Hairston. We have 2 items for discussion on the agenda. I will say tonight what we're going to do is from each of those items of discussion, we're going to hear a presentation. And so I just ask that any board members and any people in the audience who have any questions, that we just wait and get through the presentations, and then we can ask our questions at the end, just so that we can make sure we give enough time for our presenters to get the information out there, and especially so the information can get out there to the public who may be watching at home. And so thank you everybody for coming. And with that, I will turn the agenda over to Mrs. Elliott and get us started.
Okay, so we are excited tonight to be hearing from our staff and students from one of our high school programs. They're going to be sharing with us about the Gahanna Barkery. And so I would like to turn it over at this time to Tiffany Hanna.
Sure, yeah. Should I use the microphone now or the computer?
Use my microphone.
All right, great. My name is Tiffany Hanna, and I am here tonight with some of our students and staff from the high school. We are in the ESS program, and we have started a new micro business in our classroom called the Gahanna Barkery. So this is us right here. So I'm Tiffany, and we have the other teachers, Jill and Shane, and our speech language pathologist who works with us, Diana Huffman-Barr, and our students, Ryan Springer, Davis White, and down here getting ready for her Halloween costume of Wendy from Wendy's on Friday is Alex Frick. So this is, she's straight from the hairdresser. We have a big Halloween party coming up, so virtual, but yeah, she's going all out. So this is who we are, and we're here today to tell you about our business.
So what is the Gahanna Barkery? It is an in-school job that we created about the idea kind of started a couple years ago, trying to see what else could we do. And so we decided on packaging dog treats. So the goal is to enrich the lives of our students with multiple disabilities through various vocational work opportunities, and then taking those out to the community and providing access to the community in a different type of way. So some of these pictures here across the bottom are when we were at an event called Puppy Palooza a couple weeks ago, a month ago or so.
So the Gahanna Barkery, we have different opportunities kind of baked into our business where we can provide practice for mathematics skills, money, budgeting, measuring the different ingredients, different counting opportunities for students. There's really something for everybody with our business. It was especially, and has been especially great during COVID and during last year when we were at home and back and forth, and there were opportunities for our students at home to make dog biscuits with their families, and for those students who came to school, it gave us an in-school opportunity to work with our community when we weren't able to go out into the community. There's a lot of opportunities for fine motor skill development as well. It, as we've learned, is very tedious rolling out the dough and mixing and mixing and mixing and pressing. So all the students have a lot of opportunities for those fine motor skills, as well as speech and language skills, which Ms. Farr is going to talk about.
We have a lot of opportunities through this for our students to learn to, in natural settings where the carryover is a whole lot better than just sitting and drilling someone. So you say, it's following directions. So, how do you put the ingredients in? So that's a big thing. Or if you're at an event and you have to greet someone, or you have to ask someone if you can help them. You have to have a conversation with someone because someone will say, well, hey, how did you make those? And they have to be able to have a conversation back and forth more than just, one exchange of a conversation. It has to be a longer conversation. So it really does help promote those types of skills in a really great natural way.
So we're gonna hear from Ryan about why she likes working at the Barkery.
I like making trees for dogs. Like my dog, Sassy, is not cute. My favorite is stirring dough.
Stirring the dough, that's our favorite part.
So what our students do, they're involved in every step of the process, from shopping for the ingredients all the way down to selling the dog bones at the events. They have an opportunity to read and follow the recipe. And as you can see, we have a couple pictures up on the screen of our modified recipes with a lot of picture supports in order to make our recipes accessible to all of our students. They have the opportunity, as I mentioned before, to measure out those ingredients, mix the ingredients, roll them out, collaborate with their peers, package the dog bones, and then as our orders are coming through on our online business and at different community events, we have been selling them in person or virtually. So it's been really awesome, really great.
And Alex is going to tell us a little bit about what the shopping looks like. What do we get, Alex, when we go to the grocery store?
Flour.
What else, Alex, besides flour?
Flour. Cloves. Margarine. Peanut butter.
Peanut butter. What else do we put in our
Oats.
oats? And around this time of year, we're featuring something special in some of our bones, which is pumpkin. That's right. As well as some eggs and applesauce. So the ingredients are real simple and really easy to shop for. So I shopped, right?
Okay, so how are we funded? Our original funding source was a combination of grants that we've used, donations, and then proceeds from the sales. So we already have an activity account through Spread the Word. We do quite a bit of fundraising in our classroom. So we were able just to use that for purchases and deposits. We accept cash and credit cards, and now through the Square, also online. We also run another business, which is called The Main Cup, and that's our in-school coffee shop and coffee cart. And those do a lot of funding for our classroom activities. So we actually kind of just presented this at another forum last week. So we really were trying to focus in with for other teachers and other people that were trying to start a micro business for their family members or classrooms with disabilities. So we were so fortunate to be able to tell them how supportive Gehanna has been of all of our many, many endeavors that we always have going. We have a business or something going at all times. And so we have other schools reaching out to us to try and start some things because we are so fortunate that everybody in Gehanna is so supportive of us.
We always say our tagline is, so I have this crazy idea. And then it kind of snowballs from there. Like, how can we make this actually happen? And what can we do to make it as accessible as possible for our students? So, like Tiffany said, we have a very supportive district. And within that, we also team up with a lot of different groups and classes at the high school. So SWAG has been a huge help, not only with our Spread the Word campaign, our Main Cup, and now with the Gehanna Barkery. They developed our logo for us. What they do a lot of times, they'll give us like 4 or 5 options. They're like, ooh, we love this. And we kind of tweak, and then they do an amazing job. And then we send it over to Mike Kunselman at the Fab Lab, and then they create even more things for us, such as this amazing banner. In the past, like for our coffee shop, we've had the Fab Lab create for us a jig for coffee mugs, or our coffee cups, they're so hot to the touch, even with the little, paper thing around it. So they 3D printed this plastic, cup basically that our cup sits in, and the students pump the coffee from the craft into the cup, and then that avoids possible burnage. So it's really great to kind of work with them and figure out what works and what doesn't work. The community arts class, they asked us to be a part of Puppy Palooza. That was a huge success for us. I think we sold over $1,000 there. So that was so much fun. That was an opportunity for a lot of our students to come in and help us, since we had different shifts of kids coming to sell things. Gear also made us buttons for our swag bags, that when we go and ship out our dog bones, everyone gets a little swag bag, and people here have a little sample with the buttons in it, along with our cards. And then also, we are going to feature the Gehanna Barkery at Magi Fest, which is a national magic conference that brings in about 1,000 people that we've presented to you guys on in the past. They asked us to come back again this January to perform. So we're kind of incorporating the Barkery into that theme. And then these are some different up-close modifications of things that we do. So whenever we have an idea of an activity, we're like, okay, this is how we maybe one way to accomplish this. And then from that, we modify. So here we have pictures on it. And you can see the students are laying out actual bones on top of this modified worksheet, and then those bones go inside of the bags. Or they have to scoop out, 1 cup and then 2/3 cups for some of the products. These are just different ways that we make sure that every student is successful and has a part in all parts of this process.
Okay. So our future goal is to obviously, we wrote reasonably expand, but when you know us, we don't do anything reasonable. We're all in all the time. We want to keep expanding, get our product out there to local businesses to sell as well. We offer delivery, shipping, and
Temporary hold on shipping.
temporary hold. We got a little ahead of ourselves.
We
But
got
we're
so
working on
many
it.
orders at once. We're like, we need to pause shipping.
We will be back shipping, we hope, for the holidays. And we also, our students deliver within the Gehanna School District, as well as we have a school pickup. as well as incorporating always new flavors and sizes and just really growing this business and seeing where it can take us.
So here we just have a bunch of different pictures of our students. This is our shopping crew, going out and finding. Everyone does every part, but just some things.
So a couple days a week, we do have access to a school bus, which we're really lucky to have. So our students are able to go out into the community, whether it's to Meijer or Aldi or Kroger, and shop for the various supplies that we need that Alex was telling us about that we can go out and use for our dog biscuits.
And Davis, do you want to tell us a little bit about what you like about our business? He's got this.
I like going to the store to find reviews. I also like to can cut bones to it make the soup real good.
Our classroom, our whole hallway smells amazing,
I bet.
almost every day.
Right.
We have
Davis,
many
who's your-
comments.
Who's your favorite person not going shopping?
You.
Oh.
There we go.
Yeah.
So here's a few pictures of the baking and production crew. Sometimes having a teacher that we really admire really encourages up in that left-hand corner some extra production. So, but you see all of our students do it. And we've gone from some students who won't even touch the dough to now almost every single student will just stick their hands right in and throw it down and spread it out or use rolling pins. So we've come a long way.
These are our marketing and packaging crews. So every student has their label on bags. So they all, there's 4 different stickers that go on a bag, and they'll also then sign them after they've packaged them. So, you know, we will be at an event, somebody will be like, I really want the package made by, you know, Ryan. We're digging through, trying to find some Ryan bones. But they all get the opportunity, and they're all packaging and working with counting and getting everything ready to go out. Now we're doing the bags with the tissue paper and the swag and everything. So it provides a lot of opportunity. And we are all over. We are on Instagram. We have an online site. You can contact us at our Gmail. We're ready, open for business.
And I look out in the next probably couple weeks, we're gonna try and open up shipping again. So we've already gotten stuff from like West Virginia and Michigan and all that stuff. So it's very exciting, but also wild. Any questions?
So first, I'd like to open it up to the board. If any board members have any questions.
How long, well, when did this idea come to fruition? How long ago? And how long do you plan on keeping the barkery going? Do you see it, like other ideas you may have had in the past, do they phase out over time and try something new, or is it something that you foresee going a long time? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I would say that we have been experimenting with kind of different ideas for a while. The barkery has been in the back of our minds for quite a few years. We do, kind of our continuum is our younger students stay more in school and work on pre-vocational tasks. And as they get older, they go more into community job sites with our staff as job coaches. So this is a job that can always be in-house. So that's great for building those pre-vocational skills for our younger students. So I don't foresee it going away unless people stop loving dogs and not wanting to buy biscuits. So
Like for an example might be like, you know, the process of putting ingredients into a bowl. Well, you might think, oh, it's just ingredients in a bowl, but really that's a multi-step task. It not only requires reading, but following directions and moving from one thing to another. And so that right there is a skill that you could then generalize when you go out into, say, working at Fresh Time, or, you know, some of the other places we have worked, like Mod Pizza, where they have to complete multi-sec tasks. So we've already built and established those preliminary skills for them. So this is a really, it's taken a lot of reworking and figuring out how we can make it accessible to every student. And I think it's going, we think, really great, and all the kids really seem to like it a lot. So I think it's here to stay.
That's awesome. The last time we had experience with you guys, I think was back when you guys discussed Magic Fest,
Yes.
and a while ago. And so it's really good to see you. Really great to see the kids. Awesome.
And we're still doing magic.
I got a question. Do you foresee any time in the future as having a meow-curry or something? Sister to the barkery?
We have talked about this for those of you who ostracized. Maybe like a hedgehoggery or like a hamstery. No, but we have talked about making cat treats or maybe even cat toys, different dog toys, if that's something that we find would be accessible for us and our students to make. That would certainly be another way to expand.
And we said, we always start with, so we have this crazy idea, so we've already planted the seed.
Any other board members have questions?
I just think it's great. I love the incorporation of the math, the language skills. I mean, it's just makes it all real. And fun.
Yes.
Anybody from the audience have any questions? Mrs. Elliott?
Yep. So I'm curious how long the process takes from start to finish when you start to make the bones, when you shop and then, you know, do the dough and get it packaged. How long does that take?
Over the course of 2 school days about, so one day is usually dedicated to shopping, and then the next morning we would have an opportunity to actually bake and assemble the dough, roll them out. And it kind of depends on the school day, depends on the students that are at school, and kind of how it works into our day throughout the week. But typically 2 or 3 days in order to make not as many dog bones as we first anticipated, for as much work goes into them. And kind of sad when you're only 5 bags of bones after all that work. But about 2 or 3 days typically.
And they take about 2 hours to cook in the oven.
Oh, that's longer than I would have thought. Wow.
Then they cool for quite a bit, and then we just have a kind of a surplus, and then we'll have a packaging day where we're all kind of packaging. Yeah, but I will say that we really struggled to come up with a price because I think we were kind of like underselling, and then after we packaged all day and we saw there were only like 30 bags here, Shane's like $10 a bag. No less. We're like, okay. So that is why you pay a lot for homemade dog treats, because it is a lot of hard.
Yeah.
These guys work really hard doing it.
Yes.
Really hard. Yeah. Thank you.
So what has been the response that have gone home and had your pets try them? And
Oh, we taste tested many, like over the past 2 years, I think. Like Diana and our old teacher, Cheryl, used to have like every Thursday they would try different dog treat recipes until they really came up with the right ones. And that was a group that did that. And so there's been lots of taste testing, but we have had some dogs. We always have samples at our events. We have had a couple dogs that have turned up their nose, and which is very shocking. My dog eats anything, but yes, these have been big hits.
That's great.
Yeah, we've sold a lot so far. Like, learned how to make a website, and so from that, we have an app on our phone, and I was getting notifications all night long once we opened it up to the public. And I was like, oh my God, we have to make so many more dog treats. How many do we have? How are we shipping? Wow, so many things that, I'm a teacher. I didn't realize that.
We have Mojo Sportswear on speed dial now because our shirts are selling out as well.
That's what I wondered.
The shirts on our website, and they went crazy. People are buying shirts like crazy. So I anticipate seeing those around town, like you see our spread the word soon. So it's, yeah, people are loving them.
Shirts are really cute. Who the kids,
The
the high
swag.
school, the swag developed the logo.
Yes.
It's really
Yeah,
cute.
they gave us about 7 to choose from, and we ended up going with this one. They kind of tweaked it to make it more Gahanna colors.
It's very cute.
I can't tell. There's so many favorite parts of this presentation for me. And my dogs are certainly, I have 2 of them, so I'm glad that the baggies included one for each of them because I have a big dog and a small dog, so that's perfect. So thank you for that. And thank you for coming tonight. It's really, the Student Learning and Achievement Committees are really an opportunity for us to hear about all the different types of programs and curriculum and student life and activity that's happening throughout the district. And we're so happy that you made the time to come. We know this is your personal time, all of you, and the fact that you came back to school after being in school all day is really, really cool.
Alex went to the hairdresser.
Right, Alex did get some personal time. So, and certainly.
Coming into the meeting, she's getting ready for Halloween, and she's going to be Wendy from Wendy's. So that is why she looks like her.
We'll have to send you a final product on Friday.
Yeah, we would like to see a follow-up picture if that's okay.
We will leave the samples here for people that didn't get one.
Thank
If you
you.
guys want to get some on your way out. And our QR code is on the back. So link you right to our website, which I just share our website real fast.
Can I go on?
Yes.
Oh, sorry.
No problem.
The slide before.
Oh, right. Oh, yes. Sorry, long day. There we go.
Oh, that's great.
Super
So here's our
cute.
website, and then it has our, a bunch of the different treats on the front. We sell both the mini bones for like snacking or like little treats, or my sister's dog will eat the entire bag of mini bones. And then we have the bigger sizes too, so the 3-inch bones. And then, once again, the oak treats too, and the big bones, and then the smaller sizes, and then our Barkley shirt. And links to our Instagram. And then you can contact us here too. It has our hours of operation, but really if you go on at any time in order, we'll get it. So it says we're closed on Saturday and Sunday, but that's not bad.
So what do we have in the bag? Is it an oat and a pumpkin? Is that what those are?
Yes, you have the big one is the
The
pumpkin,
pumpkin.
and the small one is the oat.
Got it.
Okay.
Yes, just the oat mini size. And they all are sold in 8-ounce packages.
Thank you guys.
Well, thank
for
you.
having us.
Thank you for
Thank
having us.
you so
Thank you
much for
very
coming in. This was wonderful.
Thank you. Okay.
Okay. So the next topic for discussion tonight is the COVID-19 community update. And with that, Mrs. Elliott, I will let you take it away.
See the slides on.
It's in, no,
It's not yet.
there it goes. Perfect.
Okay, so I'm gonna toggle 2 computers here, so let's see how I do. So tonight, we are also going to have a COVID community update. And so we are going to be able to take a look at some of our most current data, as well as I have some information regarding some recent health department updates. So the first few slides show some data. I pulled together the student and staff positive data. This is data over the last 2 weeks. We try to look at these in a couple week increments. Regarding the positives, we are definitely noticing a positive downward trend in our positive cases among staff and students. This particular 2-week glance shows a pretty big spike there on October 12th. That's due to the fact that we had a long weekend, and so the first day of each week is usually when we get the reporting from the weekend, and so that was a 4-day weekend. So that's the reason for that big spike there. But overall, you can see that our positive among students, are pretty consistently below 4. And then staff data is even lower, and so that's been a positive trend for us as well. This next slide is kind of the first glance at data over the last week, since some of our practices have changed in the district. And so this graph shows our students that have remained at home with symptoms, as well as students that have been close contacts and have remained at home with due to parent choice. And then we also have the yellow and green lines, which green is not there because we haven't had any, but that shows the staff data, staff that have remained at home with symptoms and staff that have
They're having trouble hearing on YouTube.
Oh,
Is this any better?
I don't know if that's
I'll
gonna,
check.
Okay.
you're unmuted though, right?
I'm muted because you were.
Oh, you can be unmuted.
Okay. That will work better. Okay, so just to recap, this is a slide that shows our most recent data after some of our changes in protocols. And you can see just the blue and the red bars represent student data. And so you can see that we've been less than 40 students that have been at home with symptoms, and our close contacts have been pretty low as well. And then the staff data, just right there on the 26th, that's from this week, showing a staff member that had to stay home due to being symptomatic. No staff close contacts have had to stay home in this last week. This next slide shows data that we've looked at all year long. We've tracked it since the beginning of the school year. And in fact, this slide does show full year data back to August 12th through the 26th of this month. This is we like to be really careful when we say possible school spread, because of course we don't know for certainty where the source is when there are positive cases. But this shows that we have had 51 possible school spread instances since the start of the school year. And then of course you can see the breakdown by building. It's important to note that this does show possible school spread both in the building as well as during extracurricular activities. 51 is, maybe more than we'd like to see, but definitely, not as bad as it possibly could be. So of course, we shared communication last week about a new Ohio law, House Bill 244, which went into effect. And this law requires both vaccinated and unvaccinated students to be treated equally with regard to close contacts, quarantining, school activities. And so as we processed the new law and the information that was coming our way, the task force also wanted to dive in to some more data points and kind of do an outcomes analysis of our quarantine students since the beginning of the school year. This wasn't a data point that we had readily available. So we had to kind of dig back into some data to pull these results. But this does show both negative and positive test results for these various categories. So of symptomatic students that were quarantined, 79% of those students between these time periods, August 12th to October 8th, resulted in a negative test. 4% resulted in a positive test. Students with symptomatic household members, 68% resulted in a negative test, 1% in a positive.
Students exposed at school, 32% resulted in a negative test, 1% in a positive test result. And then students exposed outside of school was 27% negative, 8% positive. And then there's an important note at the bottom, because obviously we know those percentages don't add up to 100%, that the remaining percentages are due to alternative diagnoses. Some students, choosing to not get tested and stay out for the full quarantine. Or of course, we had at that point the vaccinated individuals that may have stayed in school. So this was a data point that the task force wanted us to dive into and take a look at also. And following House Bill 244, taking a look at some of that data, these are the new protocols that we have in place in the district that were communicated last week. So unless FCPH issues a quarantine order, that is a parent guardian decision to self-quarantine. And this would have been the data that we saw on slide 2, those individuals staying home, that would be due to parent choice. GJPS staff, of course, is sending out the FCPH quarantine, self-quarantine letter to our close contacts. So that's been happening. And then in the event that a family decides not to keep their student in quarantine and they return, then for a 14-day period, they're required to wear a mask, which is a universal requirement across the district anyway. So that's already in place. And of course, parents and guardians are urged to continue conducting those daily symptom checks. Then this last note here is that it is recommended that direct contacts do test on day 5 or after following exposure. So those are some of the current things we have in place that were communicated last week. So an update about vaccinations for students ages 5 to 11. We are excited to know that the vaccine will soon be available for students ages 5 to 11. We have already communicated with Nationwide Children's Hospital that we're willing to be a host site. We are not certain what the distribution plan is going to look like. There's a lot of discussion about the best way to do that for younger students, but certainly if we can host, we will host to make that easier on our families that choose to get their student or students vaccinated. Just a few days ago, we did receive some additional guidance from ODH. The guidance, the updates are regarding masking to stay and testing to play. So just wanted to report that there are no changes to our GJPS protocols at this time. We'll continue reviewing that guidance with legal counsel, talking about it with the task force, and certainly if there are any changes, we would communicate that with the full community. And then lastly, just an important reminder to please continue checking daily for symptoms. And if there are any students experiencing symptoms from the child participation algorithm that's been sent out a few times, that we would keep kids home to help slow the spread. I think the data we've been watching and the protocols and practices we've had in place are indicative of the fact that we can hold school, keep kids in school, which has been our focus, and do so in a safe way. And that's the end of the information.
So I'll start the first report for any questions. I just first want to say
Thank you to administrative staff and Sue and your staff. The task force did ask to collect that additional data. And I know that while we had raw data, it takes a lot to go through it and understand it and put it into a format that's easy to understand and interpret. And that's additional work on top of everything else that the staff is doing just on a regular day, right? And so we're really appreciative of that work. I think one of the reasons why it is so important, and I do want to share with the board and the community as well, is that when the task force was formed last year, the idea was that while as a public school system, while we have to follow guidance from public health agencies in order to, there's a whole bunch of liabilities and things like that that come when you don't do it, but that we felt that in order to not follow guidance and recommendations, that we needed to have our own data, right? And keep collecting our own data. And that's something that we've been doing. And I think one of the reasons why we were able to before a lot of other school districts last year say we were going from hybrid to full in because we had our own Gehanna data that we were able to make reasonable recommendations with, and we were able to go to Franklin County Health and say, hey, we understand that this is your recommendation, but we're doing something differently because this is what our data suggests. So I know it's been a long August, September, October, 3 months, but I want to thank you for collecting that and continue to collect it so that we can then as a task force, I think, make further recommendations, on help and maybe how we can kind of lessen the burden of this on families and teachers and students as we kind of continue to move through the school year, because that ultimately is everybody's goal is to use that data to be able to do it. With that, I want to open it up to any board members that have any questions.
I'll go ahead and mute myself. I just want to say thank you for that additional statistic. One of the things I was looking for in this presentation was, even personal experience through my family. I got a headache, get sent home, negative test. I wanted to make sure it showed up in the statistics, and this time it did. And I appreciate the work that went into that. That's very important, and it is telling. I think we can extract from that, but I appreciate that it's there and the work that went into that. That's definitely something I was looking for. Thank you.
Any other board members? Any members of the public that are here tonight that have any? Yes. Yeah.
Where are these vaccines going to be offered and when?
Steve.
Do you want to repeat?
Just for clarity, for anybody who's watching, we don't have microphones in the room, so we're trying to use our computer microphones.
My computer off, but not this. There's some debate about where it would be best. I know my own kids, when they were little, they had trouble getting shots. So I would have probably taken them to a doctor's office instead of a gymnasium. And so I think parents are going to have to consider what's best for their kids. They know their kids better than anybody. And so I think there's a lot of consideration along those lines as well.
Can I I think what the concern is actually the inverse of what you're talking about. I think, so can you explain, if I'm understanding the concern correctly, I think the concern is that a student whose parent did not want that vaccinated would get vaccinated if the parents weren't able.
Oh, I see.
So I guess, can you explain what the process is from Nationwide with waivers and those kinds of?
Yeah, so there's a waiver that they have, and parents have to fill out that waiver. 18-year-olds could get it without the waiver, but at the end of the day, we're not going to force anybody. We're not going to push this on anybody. And so you would have to sign a waiver if you wanted your student to be vaccinated.
You're not going to make sure that the parents are there.
The details aren't out yet. I'm sure they would have to be there.
Okay.
Yeah, they did not have to be there for the high school, but I think it's much different, 5 to 11. Yeah.
any other questions? Oh.
There was always one that had a blue line with the students that are symptomatic, asymptomatic, whatnot. The students at home with symptoms. So does that mean that there was a positive test attached to that, or just they were sick they were just sick?
Just sick with symptoms.
Okay, because that's also very interesting. I know you guys have extrapolated the crap out of this. But it'd be really interesting to know, I mean, because allergies, has a runny nose, so many other sicknesses have those same, you know, and so if a positive test isn't attached to that student, then it looks a lot, I don't know if that's worse. You know what I mean? But it looks like that could be all those are COVID cases, or it could be none of them are COVID cases. So is there any way of keeping track of that? Like how many actual, and I know that you did have it in percentages. But it looks like we are doing ridiculously well. And is there any move to go forward?
So, and I can help maybe answer some of that. That's part of why the task force also asked to look at that school spread slide that was up. So that's, I think, kind of, there was some disclaimers over there because you don't necessarily, there's a whole percentage that maybe they weren't tested. They just stayed home for 14 days. But that was one of the data points that we really wanted to find out is that, yeah, I mean, how many positives were we getting from exposures and quarantines in the school? And that's how we got back to school last year, because everybody was saying, oh, well, school spread. Well, we were able to measure school spread, and that's exactly what this data is supposed to do.
So since it says so many are negatives, and it looks like,
yeah, I think
majority of
that's,
them are.
you know, and that's something that the task force, again, once we collect the data, I don't think anybody, it's hard to make recommendations without having data to look at and talk about it. And those are going to be the discussions that the task force has, you know, over the next several months, right? Is we ended up establishing benchmarks when we went back to school to say, okay, well, if we go above this level, maybe that means we need to kind of pull back a little bit and reevaluate. And that's part of what this data is helping to inform is, okay, so if we make a change with protocols, what then happens to the data, and where's the threshold to be able to say, all right, let's pull back, and then, wait a minute, this is not tracking the way that we thought that it would. Let's go ahead and take a step forward. So we did it in the beginning of the year with the high school, and by not requiring masks at the high school and really taking a look at, okay, and established a threshold and say, let's see what this does, right? Let's not just go, 100% all in. Let's be rational about it and collect that data. And after 3 weeks of data collection, we ended up, meeting the threshold, and then we were mass K through 12. So there's some great opportunity with this data. I know our staff is exhausted in collecting it, but I'm really proud of the way this district in particular is working to collect it so that these conversations can continue to happen and go on. And so it's not just a one size fits all. This is like, how is it that we're going to respond based on our information?
And the first 3 weeks just could have been how everybody just gets exposed to way more sickness, germs, whatever. Like just you always have like the going back to school blah. So that also could have skewed things a little bit. I just think it'd be so awesome if we could get rid of masks. I just think it's causing a lot of problems within the schools. And I would just put people that's on the table after this. Looks like awesome data.
Yeah.
I just want to add and just mention and ask is do we have any internal instructions or protocols regarding we're entering flu season, we're entering strep throat season, as we, we're going to see a spike in the symptoms.
Right.
So we're going to see, we're going to see kids coming across with sore throats that have strep throat, or even just a regular flu, not COVID flu.
And it's going to look like
right. So do we have any? And again, the front line, the nurses that are working, they're great. I know they're doing their best. They're asking the questions. They're uncomfortable. Parents don't necessarily want to answer all the symptom questions all the time. So they're doing good work. I'm just wondering if they're going to get adjusted instructions, knowing that there's going to be so many other types of illnesses that obviously can keep a student out, but not necessarily for the full quarantine.
But we're not quarantining.
No, What I'm saying is, or until the negative test.
But we're not doing, that's not the protocol right now.
So,
Can you go to the slide?
There's no mandatory quarantining at all.
so what I'm saying is, okay, as of last week, let me make sure I unmute. Even as of last week, I know a student was sent home for headache and was told not to return to school until you have a negative test.
That's symptom quarantining.
So that's what I'm asking about, because the symptoms are going to pop up for all these other seasonal type issues, and they're just going to happen because of change of season and the fact it's going to be 20 degrees outside. My concern is that, you know, it's just going to add to the list of people that the nursing staff, the front end staff has to tell, keep your kid home until you get a negative test because they have a symptom.
That exclusion algorithm hasn't changed. So that symptom chart, if your child has, in that list that Jill just showed, it hasn't changed. So they'll still be using that recommendation to parents that we currently have unless Franklin County Public Health changes that. So to answer your question, there hasn't been a change.
Okay.
Even going into flu season and strep throat season and high allergies.
But if you have an alternative diagnosis,
On
so
file.
so the flu, I think is harder, well, unless you want to
And
test
so
for the
strep.
flu. But strep, right, is one of those things that a lot of people do. I don't know if everybody does, but a lot of people do test for it in order to get antibiotics for it.
Right.
I mean, if you have an alternative diagnosis, that is, you know, an option as well.
Okay. As long as it's clear, yeah.
We'll continue tracking the alternative diagnoses. We also do have, even pre-COVID, right, we'll keep tracking alternative diagnoses. And then we do have regular clinic protocols pre-COVID regarding communicable diseases. And so we'll still continue to follow our requirements from the clinic related to fever free for 24 hours, not vomiting, those types of normal things that we would be sending kids home from the clinic for.
In the email that you guys sent out talking about the changes because of House Bill 244, I think that you should have put something about it being excused absences if the parent tries to send or keeps their kid home for close contact, because that might be a worry for some parents. And also, my next question is, what are the benchmarks for getting rid of the masks? Because I know we've heard, well, we want more people vaccinated, but we can't really go off of that because the high school was vaccinated, or they had the opportunity, and they ended up masked. So what are we looking at?
So I can start to answer that. I think that's a fantastic point about the letter. And I think if we could see if we can address that in some way, that'd be great. That's a great clarification. I think the task force was first discussing how to collect the data, and then the benchmarks haven't been discussed yet. So I think that's the next step, right? Taking a look at the benchmarks we had a very high level conversation about taking a look at the benchmarks that we used last year to get back to school. What did those mean? Looking at other data and then trying to have those discussions. I think all of that is on the table for discussion, for sure.
I would say that when you look at the masking policy, one of the important things to keep in mind is that with the self-quarantine, one of the things, Joe Mazzola's letter that you got a copy of, and I understand it was confusing, and you're right, we should have put excused absences if you choose to quarantine. And a lot of parents are choosing to keep their kids home. You saw that in the data.
I appreciate the option though.
Yeah,
The option.
right. But a strong requirement of that option is to stay masked. To have that choice, the trade-off is mask. So districts that weren't masked have now gone to mask. So I can think of a couple districts that, Dublin I think is one, that didn't have masks at the high school, and I think they do now. And so at the end of the day, the data or the new guidance that just came out from ODH that we're meeting with attorneys and we're looking at, all districts are, that guidance is called mask to stay, test to play. So having a mask in school so that you can stay and choose to self-quarantine. And one of the things we're researching right now is what do they mean by test to play for, athletics, for drama and after school activities. So I'm not sure. Right now, the positivity rate is under 5%, which is, the trend is really, really good. The case per 100,000 is something like a little bit over 300 in our area. So that's trending in a good direction. I don't know when, I can't predict when the guidance will be that we won't need the mask. It may be soon. It may not come at all. I don't know.
I read it differently than you because I thought you had to mask if you had a close contact, not if you were in school in general.
Yeah.
I thought they just if you had a close contact. That's what the guy decided to come to school. Right.
Then you had to.
But
we're already. Of the new BOE.
I want to make sure I think that's all something that everybody's taking a look at. I mean, I think one of the great things too is the superintendents are meeting on a regular basis to talk about what's happening in each district, right? So what kind of data they're looking at, how they're using it, how they're interpreting things that are coming out. Because as things are coming out, they're just as confusing to all of us as they are to to people making decisions. And it's like, how do we evaluate this guidance and these recommendations and make these decisions and then make them together? I know there's different ways that schools are looking at it. I can say, I know in New Albany, for example, they extended their mask requirements beyond the time that they were going to, but there was also some data that they collected, which is something that we're looking at as well. And one of the reasons they made that decision, and I think in Dublin initially, is because they had a whole bunch of data on the population in that community and what age of the population was vaccinated and percentage. And so there was a whole meeting that I watched around that. So I think there's a lot of different factors that we're going to be able to continue to take a look at and discuss. And they all, I think, are meaningful. Did you have a question?
Yeah, I did have a question. So I believe it was this past, that transparency of letting parents know, so this is how many cases there were, this is the number of people who chose to go to school, the number of people who chose to stay home. While I'm all about transparency, I don't know if I agree with transparency when it's going to create a bigger divide, I feel like, amongst the way people feel. I don't necessarily know if I like the wording is maybe what I'm saying, how you worded whatever it was, like chose, I don't remember what the exact wording was, but when I read it, it struck me the wrong way about who decided to go to school even though they were exposed. It's something maybe to consider the wording of it, because I found it to be not, didn't make me feel good, because
yeah,
didn't.
I think
and I know I wasn't alone in that. I didn't really see it further.
I'm not sure what wording you're talking about.
If you scroll down to the bottom of the email where it says, like the case number. You're talking about the weekly update? Yes, because I'm on the website. It says close contact students and staff that stayed at home, close contact students and staff that stayed at school. What you're talking about, maybe in the email, it was worded a little bit differently. Yeah, it was, the email said on sent out on Friday. I know people said that actually. Yeah.
it's the same as what's on the website. we can take a look at it. I mean, I don't think,
It was just the word.
Yeah, I don't-
Like, I think you should be reporting the numbers. I just think that in the heated state that I think people can be like about this, it's kind of how I felt about when my daughter was quarantined because she's not vaccinated. Now everyone in her class knows that she's not vaccinated. It's been a very hot topic in our house. Lots of tears shed because she's being treated differently. So I think when you then publish things like that, it's just another layer to make people feel discriminated against in a sense. So that was number one. And then my question going to the vaccine clinics. So in the past, they were held on days the kids were not attending school, correct? Or were they held during the school hours?
Both.
Okay. So then the students were then sent back to class after being injected.
Yes, but they waited in the auditorium, a second. They waited in the auditorium for the 15 minutes that's required, and they were watched by nurses from Nationwide and our staff.
So I guess that doesn't make me feel very good. So I guess my question would be like, how much time before choosing this, or, let's say it's on Monday, how much time beforehand would you be telling the parents? Because like I may choose to not send my child to school at all that entire day. Not only do I not feel comfortable with it happening at school, I don't feel comfortable with my child then being in a classroom full of other children that have just probably received.
I think we always try to give as much notification as possible. So like Mr. Barrett said, sometimes we will find out, a week in advance, we have an opening, we can fit you in. And so we try and get that communication out as quickly as possible. And we'll definitely do it that way this time as well. As soon as we know it, we can get that information in a clear format out to families, we'll get that out.
I'm guessing that would not be an excuse absence, though.
Did you have another question?
I know that you guys said that they have to sign a waiver. What kind of liability falls on the school though if something happens during one of these clinics? Because we're hosting it basically. What kind of liability do we have?
We had our attorneys check the waiver and look at our liability, and we were not, liable. We were safe to do the clinic in her opinion. And so I think it's a good question. We did check that out.
And I think too, there's a differentiation. It's not like the clinics that we've done and what I think we're talking about here, they're not Gahanna Lincoln or Gahanna Jefferson clinics.
But they're in our building.
Right. And so they're able to, there was enough of the waiver that we were able to sign was enough that made the attorneys and legally feel good about the fact the waivers, everything that's getting tracked, how it's getting signed up, like it's just providing the space. It's not, it's not facilitating that. And that was something that we had a lot of questions about. And it's I think a good question to ask.
So who is held liable? Children's?
Nationwide Children's. Yeah, they're the ones that are running the clinic or whoever might be running the clinic.
That's that's why we feel like parents should either be there or like it should be done at a doctor's office because they happen.
Yeah, so the purpose of the waiver is to make sure that the parent of that child is okay with the arrangement that has been made. The district doesn't have any liability at all. And then the parent of any child who the parent who chooses to have their child vaccinated has all of the information when they're making a decision about their own child. So I guess I'm trying to follow, are you concerned about the children who are being vaccinated that whose parents have given permission And when
I
you're,
just want to make sure that if something happened about the 15 minutes that they're watched,
yeah,
so
so
the teacher knows these kinds of things to look
Sure.
for.
yeah, I mean, that's up to the parents of that child, whether or not to have their child participate in the vaccine clinic.
I think she's saying like once the 15 minutes is up and they go back to the classroom and the teacher now has 24 kids in the class, if something happens,
We would
no
do,
longer with the nurse.
yeah, we would do what we would normally do if
Right,
someone was sick. And I can tell you, the first clinic, we did over 300 kids and nothing happened. And so we've done 3 of them. And so there has not been a case, as, you know, it's a good question you're asking, but there was no case of a student that I know about. Now, you know, with the Moderna vaccine, you know, people have gotten sick, you know, after it, but the Pfizer, some have reacted, there's a sore arm, but we would do the same thing in that classroom that we would do when a child fell or was sick, and we would make sure that they would get the help they needed, you know, and there may have been some kids that, you know, had, you know, some symptoms, you know, right after the vaccine and were sent to the clinic and monitored, and their parents came to get them, but it hasn't been a large scale issue. And so 2 of the clinics we did during the school day and 1 we did in July. So it was, you know, that one was, you know, they stayed for 15 minutes and then their parents were generally with them for that clinic.
One more in the corner. Oh, and one behind you. Oh, sorry.
So I think it's great that we're collecting the data on what's going on right now. I've seen a lot of statistics in the last couple of years. I think sometimes people get bogged down and not being able to make a decision, but either not enough or too much information. So despite all that, the information that we're using to base our policies on are coming from the Ohio Department of Health. And one of the studies says that masks are effective, but it's not a peer-reviewed study. So I'd like to know why we're not using a peer-reviewed study. The second one states that masks are safe for kids to wear. But if you click the link and actually read the study, it says it was only done for 30 minutes. So obviously kids are spending a lot more than 30 minutes in school with masks. And then once we figure that out, how do you square that with the kid going to a football or soccer with 1,000 other kids on Friday night and screaming and yelling over each other while they have been masked up in school? Why we're going off of this data to determine policies. We should be making decisions on a local level, not going off of the state or national, because the state just cut and pasted all that Ohio Department of Health stuff from the CDC website.
So, I mean, I can answer a little bit about that from a perspective of somebody that's serving on the task force and just kind of been part of that creation and just what's happened. I mean, I think that there's a lot of conflicting information out there, and I don't disagree with what you're saying. There's things that are being published that are peer reviewed. There's things that are being published that aren't. There's guidance that's being developed as a part of it. There's guidance that's still continuing to change weekly, right? We got an issuance last week, and then now there's a new issuance that we're looking at this week. Nothing from the schools, at least this school's perspective, has changed since the beginning of the pandemic, which is a public school system to evaluate everything all together, which is, you know, if we don't follow guidance, if we don't follow Franklin County Health and the state and wherever that's coming from, without some sort of local data on our own to be able to refute it or make decisions, then we also have an issue of liability, and we have an issue of how we're going to manage if there's a, and I know that seems like a, no, let me finish, please. I mean, I think that seems like a small thing, but that's part of our fiduciary responsibility as well. And we're trying to balance all of those things. That was the big argument when we were hybrid and trying to go back to school 5 days a week. And, you know, we were telling people, and the same holds true for all of this, is that when we go against those agencies and that guidance, then we have to have our own local data to be able to make the case that if something does happen and somebody files some sort of lawsuit against us and they're claiming that we didn't follow health department guidance, that we have to be able to defend that.
So there are other schools in the state of Ohio that have this policy.
There are other states in the state of Ohio, but there's also other states and or school districts in central Ohio that are not following it, that are even part of different counties.
Right.
And so we have to look at Franklin County guidance. We have to look at, so there's levels of guidance that we have to look through.
Okay.
And we're in October, right? So I think that what we're trying to do is say to you that, yeah, there is new stuff coming out all the time, and there's things that are being refuted, there's things that are being supported. But I think at the end of the day, I think last year, I think what we did from January to June, our track record's pretty good in being able to take our local data, make local decisions, and protect ourselves from a liability standpoint. And that's what we're trying to do also here. And it's not happening in the time frame I know that would make all of us happy, but that's the process that we're trying to follow as a district in order to make those decisions. And it's a tough place to be in because there is so much information out there, but it's the most logical way that you know, we were able to come back to school 5 days last year and be one of the first districts that wasn't back 5 days to come back, public districts in Franklin County, right? In Franklin County.
And that's great, but again, how are we basing that on a study that's been done for 30
Yeah, you're Mr. Rich, right? I sent you that study, the list. You're talking about the one from ODH, that document I sent you. Yeah. And I talk to parents all the time about masks. There are proponents of them. There are, opponents of them. Yeah. And I will tell you that I don't know, I'm not a scientist, so I can't argue if they work or they don't work. I know.
The doctor that was here a couple weeks ago states that he couldn't give any definitive evidence on it because they didn't have any black assays.
Yeah, so what I'm going to say though is that our goal from the beginning was to keep kids at school 5 days a week for 9.5 months. And our public health guidance, and Jennifer addressed it well, the liability that goes with that. Now, have there been times when we've looked at guidance and we said, because we're balancing this with mental health as well. So the fall of 2020, if we would have followed the guidance to a T, we wouldn't have had fall sports. We would have not had football and everybody else would have. We would have not had soccer and everybody else would have. So we said the sports are outside, right? And your question about how can they go to a game, how can they play soccer? Outside is better than inside. The transmission level outside is negligible compared to inside. And so at the end of the day, we have looked at the guidance and we have said, we're not gonna not have sports. And so we took a reasonable risk in terms of liability. We made that decision. So it has been really, really hard. FCPH just put out guidance 2 days ago. ODH put out other guidance that changes it. It is extremely frustrating and it's extremely difficult to follow. And I get the frustration. I feel it too.
And I would just add that there's no one study we're looking at to drive decisions. There's no one recommendation. It's everything together, right? It's the science, it's the health department recommendations, it's our internal data, and it's a constant struggle because we know that there are families that have beliefs all over the place, and so we're just continually trying to come back to our data, continually trying to look at the recommendations, and continually trying to keep our kids in school.
Students are going to the football games and the soccer games and read that data to back up more positions with these other agencies, because I know it's outside, but if you're social distancing, that is the point of mimicking outside, if you will. So if you're social distancing in the classroom, it's almost as good as being outside, or so they say. So if that's the case, can't we just track how many students go to the football game and then use that as a data point to say, hey, if our students are around each other for 3 hours at the football game on Friday nights, spitting on each other, and no cases of COVID showed up on Monday morning? Or is there some way that we can maybe incorporate that into the data? Or have you looked at something like that?
I think think those are, I mean, that's a great suggestion. I don't know how practical, I don't know how we would do that, but I think those are the kinds of ideas that are always welcome, right? I mean, and that's why some of the new data points that have just been collected recently even have been recommendations to say, okay, how can we look at this different? So it's not, I guess my point too is we're not just saying, okay, this is our only data point. These are the only things we're going to consider, but we have to have a reasonable means to be able to do it. And I'm just not sure how we would be able to do that. But I think that's what collecting the data is about, though. It's about the idea of this, if we can figure out a way to realistically collect all these different data points, the spread in school, the spread in, indoor sports was different than outdoor sports, right? So you had higher numbers of kids that were infected and then positive as a result of an indoor sport that they played versus outdoor. Why is that, right? When they're still, you can look at a volleyball team and, okay, well, they're this many feet apart, but why would that have happened? So there's lots of things that I think, information that we're sifting through. I think what I hope that maybe tonight, my point is, and maybe the point I'm trying to make is that we're not just saying, this is it. Too bad, too sad, right? We're continually trying to figure out how to set thresholds, set benchmarks, listen to suggestions, see what can be practically incorporated, see what can't. And then also to communicate to you that from a very practical standpoint, the fiduciary responsibility we have to make sure that if we are going against guidance from those health agencies as a public school, that we can't bankrupt the school based on a lawsuit because we didn't follow that guidance. We have to be thoughtful about that. And that's something that we struggled with all last year with being in school and out of school. And I think I must have questioned our attorney. You were on some of those phone calls because I'm like, this can't be right, like this can't be happening. But it really was. And Matt, you were part of those discussions as well. It's that balance between that, like all of those responsibilities in that big picture. And some of that doesn't come out in some of these discussions. And I don't, how do you put that on a website, right? How do you put on a website, like, well, because of liability, we tried to send a letter out once and it was like 10 pages and everybody was like, what are you guys doing? To try to let the community know, like, these are all the things that go into this.
I guess, doesn't it make sense though, if parents knew at the beginning of the year, their kids were going back, at least to the high school, unmasked, or they stayed at home learning, they had already decided whether their kids could.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would argue that when we had the Student Learning and Achievement Committee before we came out with the guidance, and then when the guidance came out, we were clear about the fact that this could change, because there was a lot of folks, and in fact, some of the folks in this room that were like, I don't know what choice I want to make for my student. And we were clear about the fact that this could change 4 or 5 times, 10 times throughout the year. And so deciding to come back all in was a decision that was going to be.
I think maybe that goes to her point earlier. I think a lot of the things aren't written very well by a variety of sources. So for myself, when I got that and I read, and I think that was like one of the 6-page documents, so it was pretty long. But I didn't see anything saying, this, but common sense would say, yeah, okay, things may change. But then I would expect that as a parent, then I would get a voice again later, as opposed to like, once you made this choice, now you're committed to it, and now your son or daughter is committed to a choice that he didn't even get to have, or she didn't even get to have, and I don't really feel like that's fair to the. Now, I don't know about the littles, I'm talking specifically high school for myself, but my son can make his own choices. He's gone to adulthood. So if I present him, you have 2 options, and he picks one based on the information he has, well, when that information changes, and now he doesn't get a choice, that doesn't really prepare him for future life and activities, because that's not how normal life goes, right? You get options, you always have some kind of control. And right now, unfortunately, I feel like there is no control for kids.
Yeah, I think that, one of the things we always say, and this is something that I give credit to the board for up to this point, I mean, and also the administration, we look at something that comes out from a communication standpoint, it's always easy to look at it and look at it again and look at it 5 more times. We have a communications consultant who's an expert in that field, and then it comes out and within a couple minutes, we're like, what did we just say? And so I think there's, if you ever hear anybody, and certainly I'm not going to be on the board much longer, but you can let me know and I'll come in and I'll raise heck. But if you ever hear anybody in the administration or board say we're at the point where our communications is perfect, then that's a problem, right? Because that's just never a perfect thing, and people hear and receive, information differently as well. I do, I get what you're saying as a parent and on a personal level. I think that if we, again, there's some issues with, as far as saying, okay, well, now we're going to do this with the masks, so now you have a choice to stay home or not. I think there are some logistical issues and some financial issues with that, and the school being prepared, and whether or not the state even allows you from a legal standpoint to even switch your kid to an online platform, because we don't technically offer, online school and remote learning in the same way that we did during the pandemic, so the law doesn't allow us to. So there's a whole host of things that come with that too. But I get what you're saying, because at the end of the day, it just isn't fair, right? And I don't know what the answer is. That's not a good answer, but it's at least what I'm trying to say is there's so many factors that go into all of this that it's not just one thing, and it's frustrating for everyone, and I get that.
One good example of what you're talking about, Jennifer, was the recent self-quarantine letter, that if you read that in very stark language, it says you are required to stay home. So if we sent that to people without the cover letter that we wrote, you would have thought that you were absolutely required. And what did we say? It was one of the most confusing, pieces we've ever written, because we came back and said it's really your choice to self-quarantine. Yeah. So, but the point is that writing that was like threading a needle, because we were saying something that you actually had a choice here, but when you read that letter, it sounded like you didn't have a choice.
Yeah, and it's hard,
right?
That's
I mean,
hard.
and that's what was so difficult about it. It was confusing.
So I think we're going to wrap up soon, but I have two questions here.
What's that?
How is this a liability issue for the district when the kids are at a 0.0001% chance of any significant harm?
So there is actually, if you look statewide, there have actually been lawsuits that have been filed against school districts. I think that there are 2 related to school districts who did not require masks. One of them was filed by,
there's one in Wisconsin.
I think it's a class action lawsuit representing students who have special needs. And then the second lawsuit was filed, I think, by an individual parent against a school district. And the allegation is that because the district did not have mitigation strategies in place, that their child contracted COVID. So that's the kind of liability that we're talking about.
So that's a pretty minimal liability risk.
I can't hear you, I'm sorry.
That's a pretty minimal liability risk, considering the fact that kids are getting sick from the masks too. And with the numbers dropping, I'm really confused on why we're still masking everyone if the masks work. So why can't we have masks optional like so many other districts have? If the masks work, then the parents that want to have the masks don't have to wear them. So parents that don't want their kids to wear a mask don't have to take that risk.
So I wish that was how the science said the masks work.
That's not true. I have lots of data to back up that.
The recommendations that none of us sitting in district administration or on the school board, none of us are doctors or public health experts. We have some nurses. I don't believe we have any doctors that are on staff. So we're not the ones who are personally evaluating scientific studies. We are charged to take the recommendations. I think what you heard Jennifer explain is the expectation is of the school districts that we will follow the recommendations from the Ohio Department of Health and then from our county health departments. And then when we make a decision that we're going to not follow those recommendations, in order to make sure that we're taking our fiduciary responsibility to protect the district from a lawsuit, we look to make sure that we have some local data in the event that we would get sued. If that,
Then why are we not following the other districts for doing that?
So let me just ask you, in our area, in central Ohio, in Franklin County, what districts are you saying are mask optional? Because I don't know.
under
of any.
Franklin County Public Health.
I don't know of any.
Right.
I'm sure that there were.
There are none.
Is actually still high school optional. So New Albany's is ending in 2 weeks.
Okay.
No,
They
New
were-
Albany is,
They're not.
yeah, they're voting again in 2 weeks. It's not ending.
So I don't know of any in Franklin County. There are some in some other areas.
Explain to us why you are masking. Why don't you show us the data that shows us why you're masking the kids?
We're masking because that is what the recommendation is from Franklin County Public Health.
And ODH does, Lisa, ODH does not say it's up to the school district. It does not say that.
Well, you didn't seem to understand the ODH
Yeah.
recommendation either. Because you were saying that.
All right.
schools are now
I mean,
masking
that's fine.
because of- it's not true.
Okay.
You said something that's not true.
You know what, this has gone from, and I appreciate you, because I think we were having a really good discussion, which is what happens in committees and with, I mean, and I appreciate some of the comments here. I'm not getting to the point where we're gonna devolve into just arguing. I understand this is a frustrating thing. We might not agree.
It is frustrating. We're the ones with the little kids. They hate them.
I only have one question. My question was, so how?
You don't have those kids. Don't look at me.
How do
Okay, we're done, sorry. It's, what time is it? 7:55. The meeting is now over. Thank you. I can answer your question after the meeting's over privately. We have a regular board meeting, a special board meeting. And do we need to adjourn into the next
We have to
room?
go into the next room.
That we need to go into the next room and handle?
35, 40.
As long
Warm
as you
up.
don't slip, right?
I mean, if it's icy, no,
Right.
especially me.
Yeah. Flex?
Come on up, sister.
You had like 10 hours to get 8 in. So you
Yes.
had some people that will leave and then go play.
So on.
Holes and come back and finish their. They'll do
I'm not-
4 and then go do 9 and then come back.
Yeah.
So at this point for audit, you do have the somewhat flexible schedule. You can start anytime after 7 o'clock, but before 8:30, and you can stay until 5.
And I think I have to get in to let everybody in.
I think I'm in.
I think some people didn't leave. Oh, good. Okay, is everybody on? Mike, are you on okay? Oh, there you are.
Yep, I'm here.
Hey, Mike.
Oh, I don't believe I can do anything voting or stuff because I'm not physically at the meeting.
Well, you're not a board member and wouldn't be voting anyway.
I mean, to call the roll and.
No, you're not a board member. You are
So I
perfectly
can
fine
still-
to
I can still
participate
do that.
virtually.
Okay.
Yep. Okay, so is everybody ready then? All right, I even have the gavel. This is a funny special meeting. Good evening and welcome to the special board meeting. It is 8:06 PM. Mr. Verlingo, can you call the roll, please?
Mr. Campbell,
Here.
Ms. Chrysler,
Here.
Mr. Hairston,
Here.
Ms. Mooring,
Here.
Ms. Pickle Antonio.
Here. Looks like we have one item for action under financial business. Is there a motion to approve item number 1 under letter A, financial business?
I'll move.
Thanks, Mr. Campbell. Is there a second? Thank you, Mrs. Mooring. Any discussion?
So we have a healthcare committee, as you know. We talked about this in our finance meeting. A couple of years ago, we had 19 members of our insurance who are under our insurance reach catastrophic loss. We had to take out a loan because we had eaten up our reserves. The unions that we work with, so transportation, our aides, and our teachers union, we work collaboratively in a committee to build our reserve back up. We raised premiums significantly, whereas a lot of districts did that over time. We were in a position where we had to raise our premiums almost overnight. And it was a shock to the system for a lot of folks with healthcare. Their deductibles more than doubled, their premiums doubled for the family plan. And at the end of the day, we have deliberately and methodically worked through a process of building our reserves back up. We paid off the $2 million loan we took out to cover our healthcare costs. And we have not changed the funding mechanism from the board side or the employee side. And so we got a renewal, and this was on the agenda, 5% renewal for the next 2 years from MMO. And that's for a fully insured rate. So the example I'll give you is if we spend $10 million a year for healthcare costs and we only have claims that equal 8 million, then MMO would be out 2 million. By the same token, if we spend 10 million and we had claims or we would be out 2 million in the first example. If we spend 10 million and we have 12 million in claims, then MMO would be out 2 million. So it's a safe plan for us. But one of the things that we're not sure about is what will the new renewal rate be after this next 2 years? And so we could make the argument that we're overfunding on the board side and on the employee side to prevent what happened from last time. So the recommendation tonight is to approve this renewal because it's very good. It's for a fully insured plan, but I know the board, we've had some discussions and you would like us to visit in healthcare committee the rates to see if we're maybe overfunding on both the board and employee side. So that's something we would take to the healthcare committee. I've had a couple of you ask me about that. And so I don't know if you want to have a discussion now about it. And Mike, if you want to say anything as well.
Yeah, we currently have about 2.5 million in reserves. That will projected to be about 2.8, 2.9 at the end of this calendar year. And that'll continue to build at the current rates to 4, 5 million. So the question comes, at what point do we either reduce the amount that we're paying into the fund, or do we increase benefits, or do something else to the plan, or go self-insured or into a consortium? But having a reserve is a good thing because it does help buffer or absorb cost increases. So to the extent here where we have a 5% increase, but we're collecting 16% in excess of the actual premium, we're able to absorb that increase without increasing rates and still continue to build the reserve.
So from my perspective, if I can add, we are increasing reserves, but we're in a fully funded insurance plan. So I understand at Finance Committee, there was a question with how the auditors are going to examine this growing pot of money when we're in a fully insured insurance plan, yet we're acting like we're in a self-insured fund, right? And so from my perspective, if our projected total insurance costs are approximately 22 million, and the district is funding, let's say 88% of that, we are spending 1.9 million, almost $2 million to put money in a reserve that we lose control over at that point in the general fund. So is that a business decision for the district to be making? And so that's where that's assuming, I would love for the committee to explore if we are able to build, and the auditors and financial gurus say it's okay, if our 16%, 5% of it needs to go for increased premium costs, can we reduce the premium by 5% to save the district $500,000, right? At that level. And then more slowly increase that savings plan if that comes to fruition. These are real dollars, right? And we're paying the bulk of the premium. So it affects us to like it would affect, you know, an employee as well. So that's, I don't know if those discussions have taken place at the insurance committee. I haven't heard that, but the decision just to go, because we elevated the premiums, or the committee elevated the premiums because we had a loan to repay. So, well, I understand, but that incremental piece was because we had a loan to pay.
Right.
So, and should there be an adjustment to eliminate that or to reallocate it? I just feel like that's a lot of money to be putting away when we have other real expenses that we are trying to manage.
Well, certainly something we should be discussing in committee as to the adjustment necessary.
Yeah, I just had a question. I was just wondering if we're reducing the amount that we're contributing to this process, wouldn't, as far as the employees, their contribution will be less? Well, how would that impact what Medical Mutual has just offered us by way of the 5% premium stay the same? If they, I mean, if they don't feel some kind of security or some way about us having a good fund balance or a good amount in that fund, if we go, so well, we're going to reduce employees' contributions and we're going to reduce what we pay in also, is it going to change anything on the employees' end as far as their premiums?
Yeah, I don't believe, Brian, there would be any impact on the quote from Medical Mutual.
Impact on the quote from Medical Mutual.
Right.
Turn the sound on and off. I'm sorry. No, it's okay. It echoes if it's on when he's not talking.
So it's certainly a discussion we can have with the healthcare committee. We have a consultant, Grady and Associates. He's very savvy. He understands the market. I think the renewal, we weren't sure what the renewal would be. And it was a good renewal, given that healthcare is 9, 10, 11% a year in inflation. So I think part of it is people during the pandemic, there was less knee surgeries, less people going to the doctor for other things. And so we did get a little bit of a rebate from MMO based on that. I think it was $300,000. So we can certainly have that discussion, but we want to make sure we're prudent and able to fund whatever the next renewal would be. But what you're saying, I think, Daphne, is we know what it's going to be this year and the next year. And so can there be an adjustment made? I think, you know, that's a good discussion we can have. And I think Joe can give us the data and the recommendations. And, you know, I think he is surprised, and I think we were all surprised that the fully insured rate was as good as it was. I mean, when we looked, we asked for both a self-insured rate and a fully insured rate, and they weren't that different. And so why wouldn't you take the full insured rate, right? So at the end of the day, we don't know if that is always going to be available to us. And so having a reserve so that we can switch if we need to, if the fully insured rate is too high. But what I hear you saying is we have a buffer of 2 years to figure that out, right? But I will say that the committee is really functioning well, and I'm sure we can have a great discussion on this. It's very, you know, we don't want what to happen before to happen again. We had you know, there are years when your experience is you know, you're running bad. You know, you have a lot of catastrophic cases, and we're in a much better position than we were in 2 years ago.
Any additional questions or discussion? Okay. Mr. Verlingo, can you call the roll, please?
Ms. Pickle Antonio,
Yes.
Mr. Campbell,
Yes.
Ms. Chrysler,
Yes.
Mr. Hairston,
Yes.
Ms. Mooring.
Thank you. We have one item for action under Human Resources. Is there a motion to approve item number 1 under letter B, Human Resources?
I'll move.
Thanks, Mr. Hairston. Is there a second? Thank you, Mrs. Mooring. Any discussion? Okay, Mr. Verlingo, can you call the roll, please?
Ms. Mooring.
Yes.
Ms. Pickle Antonio,
Yes.
Mr. Campbell,
Yes.
Ms. Chrysler,
Yes.
Mr. Hairston.
Okay. Is there a motion to go into executive session pursuant to revised code 121, 22G4 for the purpose of preparing for conducting or reviewing negotiations or bargaining sessions with employees?
I'll move.
Go ahead, Matt.
Thanks, Mr. Campbell, and thank you for the second, Mrs. Mooring. Any discussion? Okay, Mr. Verlingo, can you call the roll, please?
Mr. Hairston.
Yeah.
Ms. Mooring,
Yes.
Ms. Pickle Antonio,
Yes.
Mr. Campbell,
Yes.
Ms. Chrysler.
Yes.
It is 8:19 PM and we are in executive session. I should have said this before, but for anybody who's watching or anybody who's here with us, when we go into executive session, I don't know if, are we staying here? We're probably staying here. We'll ask anyone who's not part of the board or administration or somebody that we requested to be here, we'll ask that you leave. We do have to come back into public session, but the only action that we'll be taking after we come back is the action that we have to take to adjourn the meeting. There is no other action to be taken, but you're welcome to stay and come back when we're done with executive session. You're also welcome to watch it on YouTube.
Hey, Matt, I don't have the link for executive session. Get out of this Zoom.
No.
You know, the softball and baseball coaches said they never use them, but I think it would have been nice. Okay.
Okay, it is 9:18 PM. We are out of executive session. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I'll move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm gonna call the roll. Mr. Campbell,
Yes.
Mr. Hairston,
Yes.
Mrs. Chrysler,
Yes.
Mrs. Mooring,
Yes.
and I am also a yes. It is 9:18 PM and we are adjourned.